Hello, my dear friends. Today I have an amazing woman that I have the pleasure to know for quite some years. I was counting and they are 8. We were both speakers at the Parenting 2.0 conference in Dublin. And I'll put the photo here just so that you see me with short hair. Her name is Diane Speier, and she has just published a book that is the book I wish existed when I was pregnant. The name of the book, the title is Life After Birth, a Parent's Holistic Guide for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester. Let me tell you just a little bit about her that will just like wake you up to what caliber of expert we have here. When I was 8 years old, and that's many months ago, she graduated as childbirth educator. And that is when she started her career. So she has all these years, basically all my life, helping women from the moment they were pregnant to all the way to the fourth trimester. And she hasn't just been repeating things, and but she has been growing. She has a PhD. She, when I met her, together with her daughter, she created an app that was called the Digital Doula. And she was telling me that that was the basis for this book. And I tell you, I have omitted a lot of what happens in all those years because it's just glorious what Diane is up to. And our objective today is to open your eyes to the one thing that I certainly had my eyes closed. When I got pregnant, I got all information. I read all the books, really fantastic books. I even made interviews with those authors about pregnancy, childbirth, and pregnancy and childbirth. And there is so much about it. And there is so many ways in which you have a fantastic pregnancy, a fantastic childbirth. But I was so naive that I didn't know that after the baby was born, I didn't know what to do. And this is precisely what we're going to be talking about. So if you're pregnant, if you know a friend who's pregnant, if you're planning to get pregnant, if you have a little baby, this is the stuff that you need to listen. So please spread it around. Diane, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, I'm so happy to share with you again and to be together, to have this opportunity to have this discussion after 8 years. Yeah.
Crazy. So, Diane, I know a little bit of your story. What's the story behind this book? But I would love that you share a little bit more of that origin story. What was behind this book? What led you to say, hey, this is so important, it must exist?
When I became a birth educator back in 1978, because my background was in psychology, I was so curious about the whole psychological transition that happens to somebody when they become a parent. And soon after I started teaching birth preparation, I also started running groups for new mothers with their babies, and spent some years doing that. And then that became an experience, sort of a postpartum exercise class for mothers and babies. And that ran for 20 years. And I guess during that time, my young daughter, would you come with me to these classes? And, when she wasn't in school or when she was too young for school, she was just sort of part of the background of that. So she grew up understanding things about postpartum that most people wouldn't necessarily know. When she had her first child, and that was back in 2011, I was out there with her to help her out as a sort of postpartum doula for her. We were driving back from the pediatrician's office, and she said, well, where are all the books on postpartum? And I said, well, there aren't really very many out there. And all of the years at that point that I'd been working, and that was about 35 years, I'd only ever read, and I probably read all of them, about half a dozen books on the subject. There are more books on the subject, but more recently, the books on the subject tend to be focused on what goes wrong. You know, what happens when someone has postpartum depression, or what happens when, you know, when there's anxiety or some other kind of mood disorder. And there weren't really books that focused on what works, what's, you know, what succeeds in that period after that. And it's not sort of geared toward getting back into shape or some fitness related thing. So you know, she said, you have to write the book. Okay. And I began to write the book, and then she said, you know, that book you're writing, I'd like to create an app for it. And that's where Digital Doula was born. Now Digital Doula is called Digital Doula 2.0, because it's been upgraded significantly from its first version in 2013. But so I started writing, and in those days when I didn't fully understand what an app was about, it was sort of like I was a generation beyond that. What we did was like the very first draft of the book, and it became the original Digital Doula, and it was just chock full of good information about that. And then in the years after that, I really felt, well, I really want to fine tune this book and increase this book and find a publisher for it, which is what I did over those years. And it grew into the form that it is now, with wonderful sections that cover just about everything there is to know about what happens after the baby is born. And I think it's something that we don't pay enough attention to. Another reason, I guess, other than this sort of conversation I had with my daughter, was the idea that for all the years I was teaching childbirth preparation for 20 years also, I noticed that all they want to do is get through the birth. That's their mindset in that moment, is just let me get through the birth. I've got all this preparation. I know I've read all these books just like you did, and let me get through that. And then it's like, uh-oh, now what?
Now what?
And this book fills the gap in terms of now what? Because also there are so many books now. You know, when I first started having babies in the 70s, there were so few books. There were half a dozen books and now there are aisles and aisles in bookstores, but, pages and pages on online bookstores, and about pregnancy, about birth, about parenting. And they leap from the birth to the parenting and don't really explore what's going on after the baby's born. What kinds of changes are taking place after the baby's born? What happens to your relationship after all of these things that the birth of a baby really creates in your life. And my feeling is that a lot of perinatal mental illness has a lot to do with the fact that this information is not available or hasn't been available, so that someone says, oh, this is normal. This is okay. I'm not wrong. I'm not, I'm not doing something wrong, and I'm not defective. There's so many aspects of that providing that kind of information, I think I like to think of it as preventive in terms of really sustaining a healthy mental experience after a baby's born, despite all those changes that are taking place. So I think those are part of the reasons. I think we need to say, okay, I want to get through the birth, and I want to understand fully what happens to me, to my partner, to the baby. And that's what the book starts out with. There are 6 sections in the book. And the first section is just about the recovery and the formation of a family and what's happening for the mother primarily, that's my main focus, is what's happening for the mother, because one of the things that also happens after a baby is born is that all that pampering, all that loving attention that she received for 9 months that she was pregnant stops. A baby is born and everybody's eyes shift over to that baby, and she sort of fades into the background for, all intents and purposes, and their attention shifts. And there's also something really withering about that for a lot of people. So we need to sort of, my idea was to sort of bring her back into the center of attention, so that we are paying attention to what her needs are. And if she's getting her needs met, she's going to be much better able to meet her baby's needs and also the relationship needs. So that's primarily my focus is on the mother, but also on the father. And so a partner, and every section has something related to the partner's needs or the partner's experience.
I would like to bring your attention, or bring our attention to specifically that point, the birth of the mother. It appears as something like simple. I had a tummy and now I don't have a tummy. It's not true. I share with you something really beautiful of Dutch language. In Dutch language, you have the word zwanger, that is pregnant. And the next 9 months after you are pregnant, you apply the verb ontzwangeren. So it's kind of depregnatize. So that's the word ontzwangeren. And I found it so profound when I experienced, because I had 2 children, that process of not becoming unpregnant, but becoming something else is really like a turn in the spiral. For a woman, let's imagine us a pregnant woman for the first time. What would you tell her about this 4th trimester?
Oh, wow. There's a whole book I could write about that. But you know what? I think that the process, that process of becoming a mother, which is has an anthropological reference point, is called matrescence. And so when a baby is born, a mother is born at the same time, especially if it's a first baby. So you are going to become a new version of yourself. I like to think of it as an expanded and improved version of yourself, because I like to focus on what's positive and possible after birth. So you're going to transform into a new person with an identity that's expanded, that's connected, that's learning on the job. It's an on-the-job training. Who is now responsible for another human being's survival, who's experiencing differences in terms of the dynamics in your relationship. So all of these things are sort of happening at the same time. And for a lot of people, it's a very stressful time. There's no question about the fact that the time after a baby's born is stressful. And one of my objectives in writing the book is to try to reduce that stress as much as possible. There's a whole section on hormones and the stress response. So in becoming a mother, in that process of matrescence, you're taking on all of the different aspects of stepping into that new identity, that expanded identity of a mother when you weren't one before. And all of that represents, and sometimes it's a bit scary, and sometimes it's exuberant, and there are a lot of mixed emotions that are going as part of this process. And it's to be expected that, sometimes you're going to be feeling exhilarated and other times you're going to be feeling exhausted. And, and it goes back and forth. And that's why the 4th trimester is important to see it as a time frame, because it's the period of the fastest changes that take place, other than maybe the birth itself. during the birth itself. It can be, pretty quick. I mean, my second child was 4 hours, but the actual process of, as you said, sort of depregnancy, of sort of, getting beyond that takes time. The recovery takes time. The integration of this baby into your lives takes time. The ability to sort of claim and own that expanded identity that includes mother now, in addition to partner and maybe working person. I mean, all of those things. There are so many different transitions that are taking place simultaneously, and we need to give that the space that it needs. And that's why if you just sort of focus on what's really important during those 3 months after the birth, then it's sort of, I think of it as sort of clear sailing after that. You've grounded the family in a kind of loving connection. You've attended to the needs of the people that are involved. And I'm in this case, I'm still talking about somebody who's having the first baby. So, when 2 becomes 3, it's a whole different dynamic as well. And, I always want the couple to continue to foster that connection. I like to think of the team as working together as a team more as a duet. So if there's 2 people singing, each one is going to be singing a different part. So they're not singing the same thing. But when they sing it together, they create harmony. And in that harmony is a whole new tune. And that's the sort of like the third wave, of they're creating through this process a new song for the family, so to speak, in which they each have their parts, and they're not going to do it exactly the same, but they are going to be working together as a team to parent this child. So there's just so many different things, so many dynamic things going on in this time period. And I really want to help people make the most of it, to make it a positive time as much as possible.
Yeah. You're very specific in the book on and in many aspects of what it entails. The weight loss, the soreness of the breast, the sleep. And I would like to put attention specifically on the breastfeeding, because the breastfeeding is, I personally see it as sacred. It's much more than the milk.
Right.
And it's a process of bonding, but it's difficult because we don't know. It's the first time. With my first child, I didn't know anything. So, it's just the milk disappeared. Tell us more about why is breastfeeding so important? How can we take advantage of these opportunities as much as we can?
As you said, it's not just the milk. Breastfeeding is a way of establishing an attachment with your baby. I mean, there's bonding and then there's attachment. And I think people sometimes get confused in terms of what they are. Bonding is the process of a parent connecting to its baby. And it's the parental side of the experience. It's how we feel connected. It's how we experience the formation of that attachment. The attachment side is the baby's perspective. It's what kinds of things are going on, what kinds of interactions are happening with the parent or whoever it is, that sort of parental figure, that establishes a connection from the baby's point of view, that they begin to understand the sounds, the meaning, the touches, all of those kinds of things that help that baby feel securely attached. So bonding and attachment are facilitated by breastfeeding because there is this physical contact, is a body contact that's going on that fosters that stimulates those kinds of very positive interactions that are not only nourishing, but are nurturing. And so baby's getting the exact kind of food that it needs, but in addition to it's getting those touches, those feelings, those, of learning about the body. It's sort of like the seeds of intimacy are being laid down during those processes. And the experience, they say that, a mother is a first relationship. And, when you can create a positive relationship at the breast, what happens is that child feels secure, it feels bonded, it goes through life trusting that relationships are positive, and there's a consistency about breastfeeding that, just reinforces that on a daily basis. So, breastfeeding has a whole section in the book, and it breaks it down into some of the practical realities about breastfeeding, but also some of the cultural influences on breastfeeding. And sometimes those cultural influences are not positive. And for some people, they're having to sort of swim upstream against, certain ideas about whether you should breastfeed your baby in public, whether it's acceptable, and people have so many different attitudes about that. And some of them are just retrograde attitudes about what's permissible and what's acceptable in terms of how we feed our babies and where we feed our babies. So, I'm presenting that as be aware, because this could happen. And if you understand that that's out there in the environment and in the culture, then you can continue to persist with what you want to do. And but let's not make let's not pretend that it's not a difficult thing to do. It is not something that's automatic. And sometimes we have this idea, or somebody's given us this idea that when your maternal instinct will kick in and you'll know what to do. No, you won't. I remember the first time the first baby I had, 1974. And I didn't know much. There was one book called The Complete Book of Breastfeeding, I think. And I read that book, and it didn't prepare me for reality. So one day, about 3 days, I think it was about 3 days, because we stayed in the hospital much longer in those days, that I woke up and my chest was as hard as a rock. And I said, what's going on here? And my obstetrician came in to check on me and see I was okay. He said, oh, your milk come in. And I remember feeding my son on that day, and there was so much milk that he threw it all up. He just vomited it, like projectile vomiting. And I realized, oh my God, he's been used to a couple of drops of colostrum for all these days, which is really all the baby needs. And, sometimes people feel, oh, the baby's lost so much, weight. But it's normal for the baby to lose some weight after it's born. A lot of that weight is just excess fluid, especially if the mother's had an IV during her labor. That IV is going to perfuse into the baby's system. So the baby's born with excess water in its system that it excretes when it urinates. And so it's going to lose some weight. But some people get scared about that, and they think, oh, it's not good. I better supplement the baby. Baby's not getting enough. The baby, until your milk comes in, the baby's getting all that it needs, because the content of colostrum is full of all kinds of antibodies and immunities and things that it's taken from your body for protection. So, and then when the milk comes in, be prepared, because it's so much. The baby's not really prepared for it. It doesn't know what to do with it, and the body's just going and then of course it settled down, but that was a one-time thing. And I do remember that, because I didn't know that my chest was going to become hard as rock when milk came in. Nobody told me that. The book didn't tell me that. The book spent more time. I was reading almost 50 years ago now, but it spent more times about some of the practical things about it and stuff like that. I don't ever remember hearing, when your milk comes in, your chest's going to get really hard. But after that, with my subsequent children, I breastfed more frequently, And I, never got that kind of engorgement that was part of it. And engorgement is also a part of breastfeeding that is in the beginning stages, and then it subsides. And so many things just start to make sense after a period of time. And usually by about 6 weeks, you've figured it out. And it requires figuring out. It isn't, please don't go in there thinking it's automatic, because it isn't. It is a learning process. And for some people, it's a steep learning curve. So yeah, there's so much to love about breastfeeding.
Oh, I really love breastfeeding. With my son, I was told that you needed to breastfeed every so often, and wake up the child, and with the clock, and yeah, lost the milk. It was really a disaster. And with my daughter, I learned a little bit more about breastfeeding, and I did it on demand. And even she got ill when she was a little baby, and I lost the milk, and I regained the milk by doing it on demand. And that I learned that to connect with the intuition, connecting to your baby, to see what your baby needs. And
Yes.
that's what I love of everything that you have been written in your book, because it's like a bit between the lines everywhere, and in the title, holistic.
Yes, I want women, and I want partners also to really learn how to trust their instincts. That maternal intuition, again, it's not automatic, but it's something that evolves just through the everyday activities of being a mother. And you will sense, if you are not too rigid, you will sense what the baby needs when it needs it. What maybe I need to feed it now. Oh, it's not time. It doesn't matter. I still need. It sounds like I need to feed that baby now. I want women to trust them, and I want their partners to sort of say, okay, if and allow that to unfold. And my idea about it being a holistic guide is that there are so many dimensions to becoming a family. There's the physical recovery after a birth. There's the emotional experience of all those changes that are taking place. There's the mental experience of expansion and growth and, new horizons. And then there's the spiritual component, and that doesn't get enough emphasis. I think it's sort of the missing link in terms of preparing for parenthood. And so I really take the whole, literally the whole of holistic, and hope that by sharing that with people, that they'll feel more confident about trusting their instincts.
I think this is a nice introduction to your wellness plan. This is your methodology. I really love that you use this word as the acronym of your process of how to go through this period.
Yeah, and it's called wellness as an acronym. So the W stands for we, and that's about protecting your relationship. And it's about understanding the kinds of changes that are going to take place, understanding that each of you is going to be moving at a different pace, in a different way, with a different style. And what can we do to keep that connection really solid? And how can we, inform the experience of a partnership? When a partner becomes a parent, it really does change the dynamics there. So that's the first module, and let me tell you that this postpartum wellness plan is now becoming an online course that I'm going to be releasing in the next couple of months, actually. So the we in the module is called How to Baby-Proof Your Relationship. And it gives lots of lessons on what to understand. Sometimes when you become a parent, the childhood wounds will kind of resurface as, then play themselves out because, they get triggered when the person becomes a parent. Sometimes people pay no attention to the division of labor. When one of the bonuses with the launch of my book was what we call division of labor, and my assistant created a beautiful document around that. But most couples don't understand that it's really good to kind of talk this through before the baby's born, because there are a number of tasks that are taken that we do as people in a household, right? So imagining that it's the first baby and you're just a couple and you're free to come here and go there. How do you distribute the different kinds of chores that need to be done? What often happens, and what a lot of mothers aren't prepared for, is that the egalitarian relationship that was going on and was really smooth up until the baby is born changes. And now all of a sudden, because mama is home with the baby, she's taking on a lot more of the domestic responsibilities that was shared before between the two of them when the partner goes out to work. And then she's starting to feel resentful that not only is she having to take care of the baby 24/7, but she's also having to do this second shift, as they call. So the creation of the division of labor chart was for them to list all the chores that they do. I sometimes call them tasks. Chores has a pejorative sound to it. So these tasks, well, who's doing that now? That's the column. Who does that now? And who's going to do that after the baby's born? Mm-hmm. And who's going to take care of the infant care? Because not all of it has to be done by the mother. And so this crystallizes in their mind in advance those responsibilities. And if you sorted that out, and if you decided in advance, okay, well, I'm going to do this and you can do that, and then it feels more equal, then she doesn't have the feeling that she's sort of retrograded into some kind of gendered stereotype, which is what often happens. And it feels like a backslide for women, especially when they've stopped working in order to take care of the baby. So all of these different features in there, working that out and creating an awareness of, wow, things aren't going to change. Who's going to do that later? Will do a lot for preventing that kind of resentment from developing. So that's the first one. That's the W. The E stands for energy medicine. And this is why this book stands out from other books, is that I have introduced the protocols and techniques of using energy medicine for self-healing and for self-care. And they're very simple, and you don't have to, doesn't require seeing a practitioner to do it. You can do it for yourself. And in the fourth trimester, when fatigue can be a big problem, an issue, then doing the daily energy routine is a wonderful way of not only getting all of the energy systems in alignment and in harmony, but also providing more energy for you. So that's the energy medicine focus for the very first section. So each section has its own energy medicine piece to it. So that's the second part of it. The first L is called loving kindness. And loving kindness brings in the notion that we need to love ourselves as well as we are learning to love our babies and have loved our partners, because a lot of mothers unfortunately become very self-critical. If they don't know what to expect, then they sometimes think there's something wrong with them or they're doing something wrong. And so I want them to understand that just like the process of metta, which is the Indian, maybe Sanskrit translation of loving kindness, that they are sending that kind of loving kindness for themselves and to others, and then receiving it. But also it brings a mindful awareness to the experience that they're having. So that's this first E. That's the first L. The second L is called less is more. And I think that my whole idea about this is that you need to put away some of those distractions that are naturally going to come in. People are going to naturally want to see your baby. But when people come and visit, it really does take a toll. And it for a lot of mothers, it becomes exhausting. So unless they're coming to feed you, you want to be very careful about that. You want less paraphernalia. You don't need that. Why? Because the moment in time that the fourth trimester represents is learning how to be a parent, learning about your baby, having your baby learn about you. That's the most important thing. That's what matters. The rest of that stuff is just distraction. So if you can keep it down to a minimum, you can expand that after that 3-month period as much as you want. But if you hold that as sort of almost sacred territory for just getting to know your baby, then you are going to be fortified to take on the world later. The N stands for the new normal, because normal has changed altogether. And I always find, and I always correct people who are saying, well, I just want to get back to normal. There is no norm. That normal changed. There's a new normal. And the new normal is all about being a family, being a mother, being a parent, all of those things. And instead of looking backwards to what was before, I think it's important to look forward to the newness, the excitement of that, the development of that, and all the rest. The second E is for expectations. And expectations can be our undoing. We have this idea that, oh, if I have a baby, it's going to fix my relationship. Oh, if I have a baby, I'm going to have this, wonderful experience. And oh, if I have a baby, the baby's going to love me. And those expectations may not be realistic, and they may not be helpful. So it's about managing the expectations so they're both realistic and helpful. And they don't set you up for disappointment, because when expectations aren't met, we experience disappointment. And disappointment is, for a lot of people, what causes them to spiral down into depression. So I want to avoid that. So I want them to understand how to manage their expectations. And then the first S is for self-care. And in that self-care, that's like a buzzword these days. People are talking about self-care all the time. But the fact is that too many mothers are so busy nurturing their baby and tending to their baby 24/7, they don't take care of themselves. They don't remember to eat. They don't remember to drink. They don't remember to take a shower. They're unable to take a shower. So for those reasons, I want them to learn how to use these energy medicine techniques as a form of self-care. And I want them to connect with the idea that taking care of themselves is not selfish. It's very much about minding the self. And the second S is for support. And I think we all need to be supported. We were not meant to have be the only people responsible for our children. We were meant to have extended families, that have people that could take the baby while I took a shower, and just provide food, provide love, provide care, provide touch, all of those kinds of dimensions of support. And support comes in many shapes and sizes. In the app, the Digital Doula 2.0 app, one of the sections is called It Takes a Village. And I'm hoping that we can make that into some kind of an interactive support place for people who just had babies, where they can connect with other parents and other people going through the same stage of life. So that's on the agenda for the near future, I hope, to really establish that as a space for parents, for new parents. So the wellness is also the 8 modules for the 8 keys for thriving in the 4th trimester. That's the online course that's coming. And if there is anyone out there in your audience who is pregnant or just about to have a baby, we would invite them to get in touch with me to beta test this. Once it's been recorded and uploaded into Teachable, it's a teachable course, then people will be able to take part and learn at their convenience. And so online learning, thank you for the pandemic in that sense, is that so much that we were doing in person, face-to-face, became possible through Zoom and through other mediums of virtual I'm a psychotherapist, so I was doing therapy with people online, and I wouldn't have said I could do that, but it turned out that you can, and you can do it really well. So, and I think online learning became a big thing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I'm like, okay, let's learn. Let's let people dip in and out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love it. Certainly, I want to put the links below in the description so that they can, if they are fast and on time, they can join your beta run of the course. This is so valuable. So valuable. Now, instead of asking you for the audience that are pregnant or have a little baby, I would like to ask you about the people who are around. How can we better support our new mothers? What can we do?
Well, we can get the grandmother to read the book because that will inform them. And we can, there is a section, there's a chapter in the book on grandparents and partners supporting the mother, but I think, fathers and partners need support as well. So supporting them as a unit, informing them. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years working with postpartum women is that the older, generation had a different experience of it. And so they may or may not be reliable sources of information because they did it differently. And then they come in and they say, well, I did it this way, but it may not fit for that particular mother. So if she has information about, through the books, you can say, hey, read this. Then the mother can be informed about that in terms of, oh, I see. Okay. We didn't know that then, but we know it now. And that's, I think, really important that women understand that the intergenerational influence can sometimes, it can be positive, but it can also go in the wrong direction. So, my mother never breastfed me. She tried my brother, he was the first one, and she never breastfed me. So I wasn't going to go to her for breastfeeding information, but yet, some mothers come in and say, oh, you sure baby has enough milk? Or, and those questions, they're not meant to be malicious, but they're very undermining. And a lot of mothers, they don't know how to respond to that because the parent is a person of authority in their lives. So when they question something, it has an influence. So I think that what we need to do is we need to inform all of the people that are looking after and loving the new mother and the new partner.
I love your answer. I love your answer. How beautiful. How beautiful. I hate how time passes so quickly. And I would like to start saying goodbye. I'm going to put all your links below, but just in closing, I absolutely know there's so much that you can tell us, but now I will just ask you to connect to your intuition. What would be the one piece that could help us close in this case that our audience is needing more right now?
Now you're down to one piece. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
What would be the one piece? To be flexible, to be patient, to understand that there's so much dynamic change taking place in terms of who you are and what you do and how you connect with another person. There are all of these different things that it requires us to be patient and to be flexible and to honor yourself. I think that that's part of the self-care piece. If you honor yourself, then you won't necessarily be thinking that there's something wrong with you or that you're doing something wrong. And so if you can really take that attitude of flexibility and patience, know that you will get through this and that it's a tumultuous experience, but it's also an exhilarating experience. And it's also a divine experience in terms of the feminine. And I know that you're very connected to the divine feminine, Blanca. So, this is a woman's first experience of of experience of connecting with that mother goddess energy. And so patience, flexibility, and honoring yourself. Because if you can do that, then you can just know that, yeah, I'm going to go day by day, and then the fourth trimester will be over, and I'll be ready to take, go out into the world beyond these four walls or the home that you're living in, and experience have group experiences with other parents and babies, and know that you've given that first 3 months after the baby's born a fabulous foundation.
Beautiful. I really, really, really love it. I summarize it as honor yourself. Oh, wow.
Sorry.
I love what you said. I love. Ladies, you have to do yourselves a favor. And the mother of that lady who's pregnant, the grandmother, go and get the book of Diane. Go and check if you're on time to join her beta course. And Diane, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for writing the book. The world needed this. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. And if they do want to get through to me on my website, it's just dianespeier.com. DIANESPEIER.com. And there'll be more information there. And they can always reach me through the email, Diane@dianespeier.com, and we'll get them set up with the beta test. And it'll be really a thrill to be able to have this collaboration in making it the best it could be.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you, everybody, and until next time.